if you're in the market for a new Android phone and the camera is extremely important to you. The S24 Ultra and the Pixel 8 Pro are two of the best options. But which one is better? Is it the S24 Ultra with its impressive 200-megapixel sensor and dual telephoto lenses, or is it the Pixel 8 Pro with its more modest 50-megapixel sensor but with Google's incredible image processing? Well, we have many individual test categories to find out, starting off with some outdoor shots. In this first we can see how both phones took a very different approach. In terms of the processing, Google kept it more natural while Samsung decided to raise the shadows quite considerably, resulting in a noticeably brighter image. When we zoom in we can see how Samsung added a ton of sharpening, which I'm not really a fan of myself. But then at the same time on the bottom left hand side the Pixel was just way too blurry. Overall I do prefer the Pixel's image here. This next photo was shot in a very bright scene with the sun directly above, and then you also have had this shadowy area where the bushes are, and here the Pixel is able to create a much more HDR looking image where we have a very good balance between the dark and the light areas of it. The only downside being the sky, which does get a bit blown out. At the same time Samsung does expose the sky better but loses a lot of detail in the shadows. Again, I do prefer the Pixel here. Next up we have this garden shot which looks very similar on both, something that saturate the colors more, especially if you look at the greens. However, it did apply this green tint on the fence and it also overly sharpened everything to the point where we lose that natural depth of field that the Pixel has. And lastly we have this beautiful shot of the autumn leaves, and once again the Pixel does a much better job here. The colors are spot on, whereas Samsung raised the shadows way too much to the point where we lose all of that color, and again Samsung tends to oversharpen despite Samsung trying to achieve the exact opposite with oversharpening. So in terms of everyday outdoor shots the Pixel 8 Pro does indeed have significantly better image processing, resulting in superior results. Moving on to some indoor shots, they are both pretty good here. The Pixel does have more natural looking colors. For example, the sky was indeed grey whereas Samsung made it look blue, and once we zoom into the chairs Samsung does seem to have more detail whereas the Pixel is more noisy, although it is quite hard to tell if it's natural detail or a result of Samsung SS oversharpening. In the second indoor shot I much prefer Samsung's result, as we not only get a brighter image but we do indeed see more detail once we zoom in, and we also see less noise if we zoom into the bonsai tree for example. So in terms of indoor shots the S24 Ultra does seem to be superior. So what about zoom? The Pixel has a single 5x optical zoom module where Samsung has two, one at 3x and the other at 10x. If we compared the results at 5x, which is where the Pixel would be using its native optical zoom while Samsung would be using its 3x, and then zooming in digitally, unsurprisingly the Pixel performs better with a much clearer image, better shadow detail if you look at the trees, and an overall brighter image too. If we switch to 10x, this is where the wheels turn, and this time Samsung is using its native 10x module while the Pixel is using its 5x and zooms in digital. And indeed the S24 Ultra is much clearer, especially if you take a look at this, although it does seem to still oversharpen everything compared to the more natural look on the Pixel. If we zoom in even further to 25x, this is where they would both be using digital zoom, and because Samsung only has to zoom in from 10x as opposed to 5x on the Pixel, we do get a much better result with minimal noise, clearer text, and most importantly a much more vibrant look as opposed to the more washed out look on the Pixel. So if you care about zoom, especially at longer ranges, the S24 Ultra will be superior. Moving on to portrait mode, we are going to start off with portrait mode. Here both did quite well, but Samsung did a bit better by having an even more superior hair. If you take a look at the colors are also better preserved on the Samsung. On both they both do about as good of a job when it comes to the color, but Samsung does have a considerably more stylized image that is brighter, sharper, and also more vibrant. And lastly, when it comes to Fortune, one object I'm actually surprised by how well Samsung does here with an almost perfect edge detection and separation. The Pixel does have considerably more background blur, but it did mess up in a few areas in terms of the edge separation. So yeah, pretty safe to say that Samsung does have the overall superior portrait mode. So what about the Ultra module? Well, it seems that Google does have a wider lens both vertically if you take a look at the grille on the floor, and horizontally if you take a look at a house on the left. Once we zoom in we can see that the Pixel does have a slightly sharper image. And in terms of the image processing, this is a matter of taste. Samsung has a far contrasty image, whereas Google really likes to process their HDR images as much as possible. Personally, I do prefer to Pixel here, although like I said, this is fully a matter of taste. If we take a look at another Ultra shot, the tables kind of turn, with Samsung brightening the image way more and Google having a more contrasty look this time. I do feel like Samsung brightened up everything a bit too much, as some areas are even blown out and some colors are just way too vibrant. The reflection in the water, for example, kind of looks like a bunch of blue flowers rather than, the more natural look that the Pixel has. If we test the ultra-wide indoors once again, we see how much brighter and more vibrant Samsung is here. I do prefer Samsung's image, as when you zoom in we can see how much more textured details and less noise we get now. Thanks to both phones supporting autofocus on their Ultra modules, we also get macro support, and here I do prefer Samsung's result, as it not only tends to get more in the shots, but a point of focus is also wider as opposed to the more central focus on the Pixel, although the Pixel does have a more pleasant color overall. Both phones can also shoot at the full resolution of their sensors, 50 megapixels on the Pixel and 200 on the S24 Ultra, and if we compare to two, it's pretty much no surprise that the S24 Ultra will be significantly sharper when you zoom in. Just keep in mind that the image processing will suffer once you go into these high IS modes, and same will apply to low light shooting. When it comes to video, the quality is surprisingly similar on both. The Pixel does have a slightly brighter image,